everybody, and I hope everybody's having a good time today at FIU. As I was talking to some of you before, FIU is a really dynamic university. It's a growing university. It's a university that is known throughout the world. Our reputation, just like Miami itself, is only growing. And one of the, I think the biggest selling points for me is that this is a very international university. It reflects the Caribbean. It reflects, what was that? Latin America. And it's our university. I've been here for 15 years, and I've seen just tremendous changes. And I see no signs that that's going to be stopping. So if you're looking for a university in which you can get a world-class education, in a place that is going to be very relevant to the future, I don't think you can make a better choice than FIU. I'm a professor of education, early childhood education, and my research area is in early childhood math. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my research today. Actually, I'm going to try to talk to you here. So I'm going to talk to you about early childhood math. But what I'm really going to talk to you about today is why it gives you really 30 years ago, and I didn't have any training. It really rose to a lot of people don't think that you need to have a lot of education to teach the little kids, what do they know? All you need to do is kind of watch them, make sure they're that was really the attitude of folks when I came into the profession. And I have a confession to make. I was not a very good teacher. I didn't do any damage, but I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the knowledge to teach math. And I thought all kids needed to learn when they were little was how to count to 10. Count to 10. All kinds of songs. 5 little monkeys jumping on the bed. 5 little ducks went out to play. 3 bears. 3 little pigs. 3 billy goats drop. Yeah, I'm thinking, okay, yeah. What kids are supposed to know, or even how kids learn. And this is what happens when we make assumptions. So, one of the things that I did when I started is that I started to realize that children is so much more complex. And that teaching a subject like math, which is really essential to children's well-being in the world, is something that you really need to know what you were doing. I started studying math about 5 years ago. For about 10 years, I studied early literacy. And when President Bush was pushing literacy, we had all kinds of programs for teaching young children how to read, especially little kids. And the idea was that we would focus so much in those early years on teaching early literacy. It makes sense, right? You read, you have to be able to learn concepts. Kids that don't read really suffer. So much was put into preschools, early childhood centers in the early 2000s on programs on how to read. Kids were taught things like phonemic awareness, the sounds that letters make. They were taught print awareness, how books work. A lot of resources in. I had a lot of programs, a lot of grants where we did that. We went into classrooms, we got computer software. And this is all good. This is fantastic. But one of the things I realized when I was in there, working, mostly with at-risk poor children, that it's not enough. It's not enough to be able to read in society. In order to get ahead, you need to understand more. You need to understand about numbers. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that poor kids were getting a really bad education in how math works. And this started early. The math failure didn't start in high school. It started much earlier, in preschool. Probably because they had teachers like me who didn't really know what they were doing. So I started to investigate what was out there and what we needed to do. So this is sort of the basic tenet of early childhood. This is what you're supposed to do with everything. It needs to be concrete. Children, 3 or 4 don't think in abstract ways. They need to operate on it. You can just like show them or talk to them. Play is very important. That's really the only way you can teach children to understand how learning takes place. Everything's a game. Math is a game. Math is a game. And there's a game to everything. Cleaning up the game. It needs to be individualized. Really, they operate more or less as a distinct individual, not as a group. They want to do their thing, not the thing that everybody else does. So you have to make sure that you're teaching each child, not just a whole group. Dialogue is kind of a fancy word. It means that you need to talk to them. You need to ask questions. There needs to be a give and take. There needs to be a dialogue in order for learning to take place. That's why TVs are no good at teaching. TV is one way. Information flows out. There's no bounce back. And therefore, nothing sticks. So you can have a kid sitting in front of them, I don't care how educational it is. And then you ask them what they saw, and they'll pick out some random thing. It makes no sense. And you ask them about the concept that supposedly they're being taught, and no, that's not what I got. It's nothing close. So, what I did is I decided that in order to teach kids, 4-year-olds, in BPK, here in Miami, and these were kids who probably did not have a lot of educational ways at home or parents that actually worked with them. I figured what we need to do is we need to start with games. It has to be game-based. Because it's not enough to know what you want to teach them. You've got to make it exciting enough that they're actually going to do the activity. Because one of the key elements of learning is something called time on task. If you don't actually spend time on something, you won't learn. So it's kind of like food. You can prepare the healthiest meal possible for a kid. But like, wheat germ and oats and all this stuff. Broccoli, sprouts. So it doesn't matter how good that stuff is. They're not going to eat it. It's not going to work for them. You've got to make it look, hide it in macaroni and cheese. Make a puree, everything like, hey, don't tell them there's carrots in that cake, So you have to make it so they actually want to eat it. So the same principle with teaching is you got to make it so they want to play the games. They want to engage the materials and the ideas. You don't tell them that you're teaching them something. You don't say, oh, we're going to learn math today. No, you just say, we're going to play a game. I got a game for you. Really quite simple. I win, you win, he gets more, they get more. You can't explain the game in like 3 words. It's not going to work. They don't deal with lots of instructions. And the first person then has to go twice, and then the third person, and then if you get this, you do that. No, that's not a 4-year-old game. tutorial game is roll it once, move ahead. If in the end you win, everybody's happy. So my grad students and I, we created a bunch of games. We didn't know if this was going to work or not. We just knew that kids were not learning the math concepts, especially the number concepts, the traditional way. The traditional way is more like worksheets, flashcards, free play, with nothing really structured. This is kind of the way I used to teach math. I had some old counters and some songs, and they learned the name of it, and it was very disorganized. I didn't have a concept, I didn't have a blueprint in my mind for how they were supposed to learn. This is kind of like asking an engineer to build a bridge without knowing about physics, without knowing about math. You give them the material, here's some steel beams, some concrete and everything. Go build a bridge. You get the raw materials, you don't have any blueprint to create it. What kind of bridge are you going to make? Yeah, you're going to make a very good bridge, yeah. Exactly. Same thing with learning. Is you need to know a blueprint for what you're doing in order for this learning to happen. You can be given all these materials, hey, we're going to put curriculum in here, zoo numbers, If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're trying to build in the child's mind, it's not going to work. So, thinking about what do kids know? So, we reduced the literature into 4 components that correlated, associated with higher achievement later on. All the literature, they say, these are the things children absolutely need to know to be able to do simple operations with them. Remember, we're preparing them for kindergarten, first grade. It's pre-operational learning. That what they need to know is they need to know how number works in order to be able to add, subtract, multiply, and success in kindergarten, first and second grade. So we go, okay, well, what are those components? And they kept pointing to these 4 number. So it's really easy for teachers to remember. So there's number name. You've got to be able to name them. And it's not just saying the number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You've got to be able to name it out of sequence. So what's one number after 7? What's the number after 12? What's the number before 12? You need to count down, you need to count up. So you really need to know those things in a sequence. There's a sequence concept in there. You need to know that those numbers are not just random, they're not just all over the place, that they are invariant, that they always have the same order, and they can't be out of order. And then within those sequences, there are other little sequences. And if there's one between every one of those, there's things called odd even numbers, which is going to be important when you get into kindergarten, first grade as well. That they go from low to high, low numbers to high numbers, less to more. So there's always going up. So they need to understand that those numbers are not just equal, but they represent something that's growing. Writing, this is the one that surprised me. All the literature said, boy, children need to be able to write their numbers. Why? What do you think? Why do you think writing the numbers is so important to learning how the numbers is important?
No, but I wanted to ask.
Yeah, it is an abstract symbol that represents lots of different knowledge. Because when you see that symbol, when you make that symbol, what you're doing is you're making that representation of it. And it turns out it's not an easy thing to be able to write, because to them it's kind of arbitrary. We see it, of course we go, that's an 8, it's a 7, 6. They're like, 2 and the 5 kind of look the same, and 3, and they're trying to remember the orientation. It's a lot to remember. And until they've done it hundreds and hundreds of times, they're just not going to be able to do it automatically. Every time they have to write it, they can't think about what you're supposed to be doing with it. Get over just getting that symbol. So the symbol kind of like etches that into the brain. That represents the four and all the things about the four. Cardinality, ordinality, and all the other concepts that are related to it. And so we don't typically spend enough time on writing the numbers. The last one is equating. It's not enough to just count. You have to use it for something. You have to be able to say whether something is more or less or equal. That's the whole purpose of is to be able to think with it and to make a decision about it. So do I want the 2 cookies or I want the 2 is exactly, that's an easy one. Do I win or do I lose? Or are we the same? And so that's really applying our understanding of numbers, applying our thought. So these 4 concepts we built into all the games that we do. So in every game, the children have to not only name the numbers, they have to say whether something's more or less, they have a sequence that they have to be able to understand, and they also have to write. So let's take a look. Here's one of the games, which is your frog. Okay, ready? Move to 5. 1, help them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the game we made. It's a variation of Chutes and Ladders. You probably played as a kid. Chutes and Ladders goes up to 100. It's too much for 4-year-olds. We cut it down to 30. That's what people understand they hate to learn. And we simplified it. It's just 1 die. It's a big 12 die. And through that, we have this really rich number conversation with them. And they have to write down the numbers they get on the die. They have to talk about how many, whether that's a big number, a small number. They have to say if she has more or less than the other person. So through the game, we're able to teach all these different concepts. And you play it over and over again. Again, you're not told kids to learn it. You just tell them you're playing. Now, let me show you. Standing. This is 4,
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 38, 39, 40,
41.
no 60.
You want to do 60?
Yeah.
All right.
100.
Okay, so that's Danny. So when we started, Danny couldn't count up to 10, couldn't write, like most of them, like 4-year-olds when they start. And they haven't had a lot of exposure to number. And through playing those kinds of games that we do, we play 15 games, about, a week for, about half an hour each with the kids. And by the end, not only can they understand number and apply it and use it to think, they actually like number. They're always counting things spontaneously. They're always asking about how much. They're always trying to quantify things. They're trying to measure things. And so we see this spillover that once you get them excited about number, it becomes something, because it empowers them. So he wanted to show me he could count to 100. He's not there yet, but he's pretty close. And he certainly got the understanding that numbers continue on forever. And that you can And we teach them little techniques like the little finger counting, so that you can keep track, double count. And he's dealing with large numbers now. Before that, I was like, too much for him. And so this is something that is so important for 4-year-olds to have before they go into kindergarten. Why it's so important for kids who are at risk is because if they don't, the perception of them is that they're not very smart when they get there. It's not that they're not very smart, it's just they haven't had a good math curriculum. They probably had a teacher like I was when I first started. Didn't really know what they were supposed to be doing. Thought they'd go on one day, okay, all right, you're good, you're ready to go. So our kids, when they get to kindergarten, they're the smart ones. They're the ones that get to be in the owls and not the dodos. The teachers give them harder questions. They get to skip ahead to the higher curriculum. They get challenged and they like it more. And so this has a snowball effect. So they learn number backwards and forwards, all the concepts. That means that when they start getting to operations, simple addition and subtraction, it's easy for them. Danny has no problem with the simple addition and subtraction in kindergarten this year. He goes like, I know that you have this many, and then you take 2 away, you're back here, 5, you go back, that's 4, 3, it's 3. I can see it, I can feel it. All right, so what have we done? This is sort of the theory behind it. This is why it's important to know, to have a blueprint for what you're doing to be able to teach it effectively. This is why you need to go to college. This is the message here. So what happens is that we're all born with a way of conceptualizing number, but in a very rudimentary global sense. So even infants understand basic concepts of more or less. If something is drawn, they get upset. The ball vanishes. They are mad or throw a tantrum. Mom leaves, no more food, everything. So they understand the concept that something exists and it doesn't exist. They can even sort of count sort of basic numbers between 2 and 3. They recognize there's something that's not right. This is sort of built into this. Teach this. And it's really just kind of survival. We're not the only ones that have this idea of comparing quantity other animals have. But we have the advantage that we can build on all this natural ability. So children start to learn the names for numbers. I'm 2, probably some kids do that, trying to use fingers. I'm 3, I'm 1. So they start to realize that there's a word, a sound they can make, represents, some concept of this form that they don't quite know what it means. So when a child says, I'm 3, they don't know what 3 is. They just know that that's what they are. A label. Doesn't really have a sense of content. So, what happens around 3 years of age is that they start understanding that groups of objects actually represent those words. So 2 means 2 dogs, or 2 elephants, or 2 shoes, or 2 years, or 2 donuts. But it actually represents something concrete in the world. That it is a label for collections of objects. It can be any collection of objects, that same label. So that's very useful to them. Because then they say, I want 2. I don't want 1. Or, well, there's 2 of us, not 3 of us. We have 3 spaces 3 seats, and it started to represent sort of this idea of number. So what you're building here is you're building an ideal number. Now, what happens is that we get the symbols here, these abstract symbols, start to become very important. That they're physically able to write them and they're mentally able to think about them. So what happens is that those symbols then go on to represent those objects, which represent that word that they've been saying, which also fits into the schema for less and more. And then you start adding all these other sort of operational things. And there's one between each one of those, and it goes backwards and forwards, that there are all these different connections on those. So what you're doing is you're building a framework of thinking about the number. And this is very flexible. It's like developing a man-thinking machine. So that those 4 concepts that we teach, the naming, the writing, the sequencing, the equating, that they all go together to solve any kind of math problem. That's why it's so powerful to teach in a conceptual way, is that you bring that to any problem, not just to one single problem, and you then for much more problem. So, to sum up, when you go to college, you learn things like this. And that helps you to do a better job in your profession. So that when you teach something, you're not like, I don't know what to do with this stuff. You get now you have a way of operationalizing. You can create things that are going to make sure that they have all the things they need that are going to make them successful when they do it. This is true whether it's law, whether it's biology, whether it's sociology. You need to learn that so that you have a framework, you need a blueprint for how you're going to teach that. That's what's going to make you successful. That's why you're doing it.